Okay, so now we're going to start drawing the onions. Onions are going to be a lot more complex, so let's look at them before we start. Let's make sure we're on onions, and I'm going to zoom in. I'm just using Control Plus to zoom in and scrolling a little bit. For some reason, alright, let's look at them. Now you have a couple of options on how you can draw the onions. Do you want them to be perfect circles and be geometric, or do you want them to be a little bit more organic? So the way that I'm looking at these circles is that they're kind of lighter in the middle and they radiate out and have this purple outline, right? So before I draw all the onions, I don't necessarily need to. I like this one because it has an oval in the middle. Anything that looks irregular usually ends up looking more interesting and more natural instead of something like this one that's perfect. So I might do one perfect onion, one irregular onion, and then just layer them up. So then I'm not drawing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 onions, but only 2 and transforming them. So the way that I think I'm going to start is with the easy one, which is going to be this one, which looks a little bit more symmetrical. So I'm going to go ahead and lock my plate and my background first. Make sure I don't mess with that. And I'm going to actually not even draw on my artboard. I'm going to draw right here next to these onions so that I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to keep my screen zoomed in so I can pay attention to what's happening. So I'm going to go with Ellipse tool. This time I chose to do it like this, but you can always press L for ellipse. Now I'm going to make it right next to it. So I'm going to kind of block out that pepper, pretend it's not there. So I'm going to go ahead and make a circle. We're going to figure out the colors later. But for now, I just want the inside to be white, and I do want an outline on these so I don't get confused with my circles, okay? Whoops, just click that away. Okay, so now I have that first circle. And it's okay if your onion's a little bit bigger, we can always resize. And now I want to make a circle right on top of that. I'm actually going to start out with the bigger circle. Now that I think about it, it'll be easier for you to see what I'm doing. So let's make that bigger circle of the onion first. Now what I'm going is to Control Copy and then Control Shift V. What that's doing is, if you notice on the right, it just made an ellipse on top of the ellipse. You can't see it, but check on your right side to see if it made it. Now, when I hold Option and Shift, Alt and Shift, you can see that it is resizing that onion, resizing that circle, and I'm not able to move it from that center point, so I can be sure that it's in line, right? So copy, paste, and then resize. Okay. Now I can just repeat that step. And Control Copy, Control Shift V. I have another ellipse on top. I'm going to hold Shift and Alt again. And I've got my second layer, third. They don't have to be perfect. You decide how irregular or symmetrical you want your onions to be. Control Copy. Just pay attention to what's happening in your layers. If you're confused, if you were able to copy, this is the step where a lot of people actually end up making extra circles, and when they go to color they run into problems. So just be mindful that you are checking and your layers. Okay, This might be my last circle for this onion. So they look pretty even to me right now. I have all these onions going out, going in. If I notice, they are closer together in the middle a little bit, and then it goes out. So now it's time to kind of play around with the color. I'm going to select all of them right there. And then let's play around with that outline first. So your outline color to this purple, and let's see what that looks like. Now, nothing is true white, even though this looks true white. So I'm going to actually go ahead, select all my shapes, eyedropper tool, and then go with this purple white. If you notice, that's not really, sometimes the eyedropper tool doesn't really work that well. So I'm going to click around in a couple different onion areas until I have the right color. And I might, actually that probably looks more likely. I'm going to lighten it a little bit. So when we go to do digital illustrations, it's not always going to pick up the color that you're looking for. You may have to kind of mix it on your own. So now I got rid of those outlines, and now I want to go ahead and add those outlines again. And it's starting to look a little bit more like an onion, right? So how do we make it so that it kind of looks like that white going out to slowly getting darker? So this is where your gradients come in, okay? So you're going to select your onions, and we're going to choose a gradient this time. So gradients are a little bit tricky. You all should have a gradient option. If you don't, you can go to appearance, transparency, or over here gradient. If you ever can't find something, you can go to window and gradient, and it should pop up. Now I'm going to click on my gradient. Here on top it can look intimidating, but here it's saying linear. That means left to right, and you can change that right to left, top to bottom, whatever you need it to be. Here it's going radial, from center out, and here it's going freeform gradients. That would be you decide how you want the gradient to be. I'm going to go with radial. Okay, now you can notice that this is destroyed all my work that I did, right? Which is fine. We're going to figure it out. So you can see that the dark values are actually on the outside, and you can play around with this a little bit. So my stroke is, if you believe it or not, the purple stroke is still there, and the fill is this color. So what I'm going to do is, you're going to click on that color, and it's going to give you the RGB or the color. Now you're going to change that from black to like a purple, and you can see that is probably way too dark. So I'm gonna change it to something like a little lighter. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Now I'm gonna click out of it, and before I click out of it, I want you to notice this little diamond. If I play around with that diamond, what it's telling my computer to do is that it's changing so that most of it is white, and it gets purple only towards the end of each circle. So I'm going to play around with that because I really like how it's making my onions pop and look dimensional. Now if you wanted to add another value per se, right there, do you see how I added a color value? You can go ahead, I'm just going to destroy it for a second so you can see what you could add. A whole rainbow and do all kinds of stuff, but I don't really want to do that, so I am going to delete that. Oops, I deleted my shape. Just gonna undo. Okay, we're back to our onions and all is well. All right, so now let's click out of it and look at our onions for a second. That is starting to look a little bit more like onion. Now, the one other thing I want to try with my onions is that I think I can play around with the stroke. So right now it's 1 point. You can make it thicker. Let's see if that looks more like onion. That's looking a little bit too cartoony for me. So I'm actually go ahead and go back to 1 stroke. That's telling my computer to make it 1 stroke. And then instead of having this perfect line, uniform, I'm going to tell my computer to try this. Okay? And now what it's doing is should change the shape. And you could even change to like a different medium, right? Like let's do charcoal pencil. And let's see what that onion looks like now. Ooh, okay. So now do you see how there's thick and thin happening in my onion as well as that pencil drawing look that's happening? All right, so I'm going to, I kind of like that. So I'm going to stick with that, and I'm going to now make copies of this 1 onion. So before I do that, I'm going to select this and group it. So Control G to group your onions. And now, instead of having all those ellipses right down here, it's 1 group. And what that does is that you can easily make copies of it. So here's your onion right there. And now if I wanted to, instead of drawing 5 onions, I'm going to make maybe 2 copies of this symmetrical onion. And let's see, I'm not sure where my copy is. There it is. Maybe make this one bigger. Don't be afraid to play around. Maybe squish it a little bit because vegetables are not perfect. And then maybe I'm going to make another copy of this. And then this is where you could even use a clipping mask. So M, I'm on my gradient, which really doesn't matter. It's still going to do the clipping mask, but if it's distracting, you could, oops, select both shapes, and again right click, and make clipping mask. And now you could change that clipping mask. So if another thing that you can do is just select that square on top, and you can decide if you want to cut your onions in half. So now not only can I make, I just made 3 different looking onions from that one onion that I drew. So I'm gonna start placing them here, kind of going off my page. I'm gonna select this group. That is that perfect onion right there. And don't worry if things are like hiding behind each other. All you have to do is arrange your layers. So whatever onion you want on top, you would put that there. And a shortcut for that is, there's a shortcut for that too, which is right above Enter key, there's those parentheses. It brings it forward or backwards. So I'm going to bring it forward using that shortcut. And now I have these onions. Regular onions, but essentially you would do the same thing. Actually, you would do the same thing as this onion. But for this one, you could just double click and change it, each one, right? So maybe I would squish that middle one or play around with it so that it looked a little irregular, but I'm not doing all that legwork of drawing the onion. Instead, I'm looking at this and I'm squishing this a little bit. And if you wanted to, you could even play around with the anchor points. I know it's hard to see what I'm doing. Let me zoom in. The anchor points, and turn the handle in. Look at that. Now that onion, and you could do that to each one if you liked. Okay. And let's see what that looks like. can click on here. And if you really have the time and dedication, you could go and change the gradient of each onion, make those gradients inside the little ones little whiter so that it looks realistic. But I just kind of wanted to, I think this one was important. So if you're doing donuts, pizza, any toppings that you're drawing, you can use gradients and strokes and these line options to make your drawings look more dimensional.